Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story.
Ring, what the hell is that noise? A sleepy Jen thought, turning away from the pillow she had been hugging to her nightstand. And to pick up her phone. She realized two things when she picked up the phone. Stan was calling her, and it was after 9 a.m. "Hey babe," Jen said when she answered the phone. "Hey, sleepyhead," Stan said, chuckling. "You must have been up late last night to still be in bed." "I had trouble sleeping last night," she replied. The truth was she didn't get much sleep last night. Every time she got comfortable and started to fall asleep, she relived Donald using her. She remembered the fear, the pain, and the pure excitement she had felt. Around midnight she got out of bed. She sat on the cold bathroom floor and pleasured herself. She remembered how helpless Donald had made her feel when he forced her. "Sorry, babe," Stan said. He thought that her sleepless night was his fault. Her being alone and a little mad at him for not being able to come home like he had promised. "I wish I could be there, Jen. Maybe just lay around and take it easy today." "It's okay, Stan. I just had a problem I was working on and still don't have an answer." She felt guilty for cheating on Stan and mad at him for not being home. "Anything you want to talk about? It's just a case at work. Trying to figure out how to handle it." Jen lied. "I'm sure you will figure it out, Jen." They talked for about half an hour before Stan said he had to go. "Talk to you later tonight, dear," he told her. "I will if I can. Remember I told Camilla that I would watch Donald." "Right. Well, let me know." "I will, dear. Have a nice day." "You too. Love you," Stan told her as he hung up the phone. Jen sat holding the phone and looking into space until she remembered that she had to watch Donald. She got dressed and ate breakfast. After she finished, she straightened up the apartment before sitting down to read a book. Before she knew it, it was time to meet Camilla. Jen walked to her door, put her hand on the knob and shuddered. "I can't do this. It's not fair to Stan," she thought, gripping the doorknob harder. She never thought she would allow herself to betray Stan. She had always looked down on women who did this to their husbands, and now she was going to allow what was essentially a stranger to use and abuse her. Just the thought of Donald doing this to her sent her into a frenzy. Being honest with herself was difficult, but she was afraid of her feelings. "Just tell Camilla you don't feel well and can't watch Donald," Jen thought. Having decided to end this, she left her apartment and walked over to Camilla's door. She took a deep breath to steady herself and knocked. The door opened and Jen was face to face with Camilla. She wore a blouse with several buttons undone. She had a short skirt, a little longer than a mini, and 2-inch black heels. "She looks like she is going out to a club," Jen thought. She realized that she had never asked where Camilla's new job was. Camilla smiled at Jen. "I am so glad you could do this. I kept telling myself that this time everything would go right. I was afraid something would happen and I would lose this job. My boss told me it was because I am a single mother and there was no one to watch Donald," Camilla said, pulling Jen into a tight hug, enjoying the feel of Jen's body pressed against hers. The hug lasted slightly longer than Jen was comfortable before Camilla released her. "Shit, I can't tell her I don't want to watch Donald," Jen thought, and forced a smile onto her face. "I wouldn't do that to you, Camilla." If anything, Camilla's smile got bigger. "Come in and make yourself at home. I have a few things to finish getting ready, and then I must run." Jen followed her into her apartment and closed the door. Glancing around the living room, she didn't see Donald, so she relaxed and watched Camilla run around, picking up clothes on the floor. Camilla noticed Jen watching her pack. Enjoying showing off, Camilla picked up the last shirt on the floor, bending over and showing Jen her advantages. Jen looked away, embarrassed when Camilla looked her in the eyes. Camilla smiled and straightened her skirt. "I don't think it would be too much to force Jen to please me," Camilla thought. Looking around to ensure she had gotten all the dirty clothes off the floor, Camilla glanced at her watch and realized that if she stayed any longer, she would be late. "I guess I will have to try later. Sorry, I have to run or I will be late. Donald is in his room playing games. Most of the time, he stays there until he gets hungry. There are frozen dinners for yourself and him. I should be back before he goes to bed," Camilla said, giving Jen one last hug before walking out the door. Jen found herself alone in a quiet room. Donald is playing games. Maybe he will leave me alone today, she thought. Looking around, she realized that Camilla hadn't finished cleaning the apartment before she had to go. She's pretty, Jen thought. Where did that come from? I don't like women that way. Jen shook her head, trying to get the images out of it, and cleaned the living room. She had just finished picking up when she heard a door squeak open. Oh no, she thought as Donald came into view. He was fully dressed, at least Jen thought. Hi, pretty lady, Donald said as he stepped before her. Jen took a step back and looked up at his face. Hi, Donald, how are you today? She asked. Her breath quickened and she felt her adrenaline kicking in. She wanted to run away, and at the same time, she was incredibly excited. Her body didn't know what to do, so she stood there as Donald again stepped up. Jen felt him press into her. The touch made her inhale quickly. She took another step back, trying to create space between them. Donald again did not move forward. He just looked her in the eyes. Jen couldn't look him in the eye any longer and looked at the floor instead. No, I can't do that again, she thought even as she felt the excitement. Jen stumbled backward before turning and walking quickly towards the door. I have to get away from him. She made it about halfway to the door before he spoke again. Stop, that was all he said, but Jen found it was like he had jerked her leash back as her body refused to go further. She stood trembling with her back to him when she heard him come up behind her. She sobbed as he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. He started touching her. She felt excited. No, 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 you're not going to force me again, Jen thought, but even she knew the objection was weak. Jen imagined him spending time with her and felt excitement fill her. She began to sob, but at the same time she pushed herself back into him. He released her and turned to face him. He cupped her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. Pretty lady, make me feel good, he said, letting her face go. Jen's mouth was dry, and she tried to answer but could make the words come out. She wanted to tell him no, that she was leaving, but all that happened was she nodded her head and licked her lips. Donald smiled as he stepped away from her, his hands to his sides. Jen hesitantly began to please him. Not like that, Donald told her, pulling her up by her hair. That hurts, Donald. Jen cried as he lifted her sharply onto her toes. Donald let her hair go and smacked her face. Play nice, he warned her. Jen stood there in shock. No one had ever smacked her face before, and she felt her anger rapidly rising. Play well. It was so unusual that she was enjoying it before he hit her face harder again. Play nice. She held her cheek, not knowing what to do. Thoughts raced through her mind for a few seconds before she shed her clothes. Okay, sorry, Donald, I forgot. She told him. You're not done. He told her, looking into her eyes. His statement initially confused Jen, and she felt her eyes get big. No way, Donald, I don't know why I let you do this, but there will be no sequel. Play nice, he told her, raising his hand to strike her again. Jen stepped back and raised her hands in front of her face. I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything. I will fix it. Jen sobbed. When she realized he wasn't going to hit her again, she did his bidding. Donald lowered his hand and stood admiring her. Maybe he'll be happy with that, Jen thought as she walked over to him and reached out to touch his twitching cock. All of it, pretty lady, he told her, holding her away. Trembling with fear and excitement, she slowly got rid of her clothes. After a few seconds, she took off her socks and stood in front of Donald. She began to please him. When Donald was satisfied, he backed away from Jen and sat on the couch, leaving Jen in the middle of the room catching her breath. Jen noticed that his excitement had not gone away. Come here, pretty lady, Donald told her. Jen stood and walked around the coffee table and stood in front of him. She started to drop back to her knees when Donald stopped her. No, sit, he told her again. Jen was horrified. She knew she had fallen pretty far from the faithful wife she had been, but this was going too far. She looked at Donald and started shaking her head. No, Donald, I am not doing that. Donald frowned at her, then grabbed her right arm and threw her across his lap. Pretty lady not being nice. He told her and began to punish her. Jennifer was in shock. No one had ever punished her before, and it took several hard hits before she started crying and trying to get up. Donald didn't notice her tears or effort as he held her. Somewhere in there, Jen stopped struggling and just let him finish. She noticed that the pain stopped hurting and was starting to excite her. She opened her mouth wide in shock and stopped breathing. Her mind was in overdrive and she was enjoying herself. Donald held her, completing the punishment, until she stopped shaking. He nudged her up and helped her up before patting his knees again. "Sit," he told her, the look on his face letting her know that if she said no again, he would start punishing her again. Trembling violently, she began to obey his command. "Wow," she heard herself exclaim. For the next 10 minutes they spent time together and Jen was pleasured time and time again. She barely realized what was happening when he enjoyed himself as well. The pain/pleasure was too much and she passed out. She didn't know how long she was out, but when Jen came back to herself, she was lying on the couch with her head in Donald's lap. He was creasing her face, looking worried, but broke into a smile as she opened her eyes. "Pretty lady, okay." Jen thought about what she should say. On the one hand, he forced her again, this time completely. He used it until he was satisfied. On the other hand, she experienced the greatest pleasure of her life being with this man. "I'm okay, Donald," Jen said, sitting up. She stood up on wobbly legs and picked up her clothes. With them in hand, she went into the bathroom to clean up. When she returned, Donald went into his room to play games. She cleaned up the mess on the couch and fixed them lunch. Donald smiled at her while he ate, and when he finished eating, he returned to his room. He played games the rest of the night while Jen watched TV. About 9 p.m., Jen's cell phone rang. It was Camilla. "Hello." "Hi, Jen, sorry, but my boss wants me to cover another shift, so I won't be home until late. Could you put Donald to bed for me?" Jen didn't want to stay any longer than she had to, but Camilla needed her help. "Sure, Camilla, I will put him to bed." "Thank you, Jen, you're a lifesaver. You don't have to sleep on the couch either. If you get tired, crash in my bed. It's a lot more comfortable than the couch anyway." "I think the couch will be just fine," Jen assured Camilla. "Jen, I know that couch is hard as a rock. You won't hurt anything sleeping in my bed." Jen didn't want to argue with her, so she gave in. "Okay, if I get tired before you get home, I will get into bed." "That's my girl. Sorry, the boss is coming. I have to run. Bye." She said as Camilla hung up the phone. Jen checked on Donald and found him asleep in his bed. She returned to the living room and watched several shows before her eyes got heavy. She glanced at her watch. 11:30 p.m. "I guess I can lay on the bed," she thought. Jen turned off the TV and went to Camilla's bedroom. Camilla's bedroom was a mess, clothes on the floor, but the bed was made and looked clean. Jen used the attached tub and pulled back the covers. Checking the sheets, she didn't see anything, so she moved the pillows and discovered an unexpected device under the pillow. God, Jen thought as she looked at the toy. It had to be 10 inches long and a couple of inches around. Jen picked it up by the bottom, turning it around for a better look. Smaller than Donald, she thought, but bigger than Stan. For some reason, the comparison made her giggle. "I wonder if this is how Camilla copes with not having a man in her life," Jen thought, still examining the appliance. When she brought it closer, she found that it needed to be cleaned since it was last used. "Disgusting," she thought, almost dropping the device back onto the bed before something stopped her. Maybe thinking about how wrong it was, or maybe it was because she was still upset about Donald. Either way, she wanted to try it at some level just to get a taste of it. She never thought about another woman, but the desire to strobe the taste of the device was strong. Before she could change her mind, she got her wish. Jen liked the taste. She did this for several minutes and was pleasuring herself at the same time. Almost done, Jen thought as she continued. It pushed her over the edge and she passed out. Sometime later, she jolted awake. It took a few minutes to realize where she was. Glancing around the room, she realized that she was still alone. "Thank God no one found me while I was out." That could have been hard to explain, Jen thought. As she exited the bed, she noticed a couple of things. The first thing she realized was how much she was in pain. The second was that she was still using the appliance. Not wanting Camilla to know she had used her toy, she washed it and put it back under the pillow where she found it. She cleaned up and lay in bed, falling into a deep sleep. Camilla opened the apartment door as quietly as she could when she got in around 4 a.m. She saw that Jen wasn't on the couch, and a quick check of Donald's room found him asleep in his bed. She hovered at the door, looking down at him for a few minutes. He looked so peaceful, Camilla thought. She noticed that he had moved around and his covers had come off on the floor. She rearranged his covers and walked to the door. Glancing again, she shut the door and went down the hall to her bedroom. Camilla found Jen in the bed, sleeping soundly. The single mother stood there, staring at Jen. The covers had shifted, allowing Camilla to see Jen wearing a button top and shorts. Camilla quickly removed her clothes as quietly as possible before moving over to the bed next to Jen. Standing over Jen, she considered climbing into bed and snuggling up to her, but common sense won out, so she pulled on her pajamas and sat down. She gently shook Jen until her eyes opened. "Hi dear, sorry to wake you, but I'm home. You don't have to leave. The bed is big enough if you want to stay, but you can also go if you like," Camilla told Jen, smiling down at her. Jen was only partly awake then, and didn't want to leave the warm bed and go home. Stan was still gone, and her apartment was so lonely without someone else. Jen moved toward the wall, giving Camilla room to get into bed. Giving Camilla a sleepy smile, Jen said, "I have not had a sleepover in a long time." Camilla smiled and could not believe her luck. Jen was okay with sharing a bed with her. Camilla finished getting ready for bed. When she walked into the bedroom, she found Jen sound asleep. She remembered that she had left her device under her pillow. Camilla pulled it out, using it quietly so as not to wake Jen, glad she didn't find it. It would have been awkward, Camilla thought. After putting the toy back in the closet, Camilla climbed into bed next to Jen and snuggled up to her. Her last thought before she fell asleep was wondering how Jen tasted. Sunlight filtered through the bedroom window and woke Jen from a deep sleep. She resisted getting up for a few minutes, snuggling against Stan's warmth, enjoying the feel of him slowly inhaling and exhaling. Wait, Stan wasn't home, she thought, coming fully awake and opening her eyes. Surprisingly, she realized that she was lying next to a woman. Last night came back to her. She was too tired to go home to an empty apartment, and Camilla said they could share her bed. She was in Camilla's bed, snuggled against the other woman, held in a loose embrace. "This is nice," Jen thought as she watched Camille breathe as she slept. A part of her wanted to close her eyes and enjoy the embrace, and a small part wanted to please the woman until Camilla woke up. Jen always wondered what it would be like to spend time with another woman. She sighed softly and gently removed Camilla's hand from her shoulder. So far, so good. Just take it slow and don't wake Camilla, Jen thought. So as not to wake Camilla and embarrass herself even more, Jen propped herself up on her elbows. She took one last look at the woman next to her before noticing that she was awake. "Sorry, I don't know why I was laying on you," Jen said, blushing. Camilla smiled back. "It's okay, honey, I'm not upset with you. It was kind of nice having someone to hold again." Camilla moved to her side, making no effort to cover herself. She could see in Jen's eyes that she was torn between wanting to run away and reaching out and touching her. "Why aren't you in your pajamas?" Jen asked, trying to break the mood before she did something she would regret. "I'm sorry, I usually sleep without it. I wasn't sure you'd be okay with that, so I put on my pajamas, but I got hot and had to take my top off. I hope you don't mind," Camilla said as she stretched. Jen continued to look at her, wanting to please her. Camilla reached for Jen's head to pull her back down when Jen's phone started ringing. Jen turned away and picked up the phone to see who it was. "Sorry, it's Stan," she said as she got out of bed to answer the phone. "I can't believe it," Camilla thought as she got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She finished and went back to the bedroom, still without her pajamas. When she came out, Jen had her things ready to leave, standing by the bedroom door. "Thanks for letting me stay last night. It's lonely when Stan is not home." "It's okay, Jen. You are welcome to stay anytime you would like," Camilla said, walking over to Jen. I gotta go," Jen stuttered, her eyes locked on Camilla as she walked in front of her. Camilla stopped a foot away from her, allowing Jen to stare at her. Jen's breathing became shallow and her face turned red as she stood frozen. Slowly, so as not to startle her, Camilla raised her hand to the back of Jen's head, running her fingers through the other woman's hair. Jen looked up to see a slight smile and excitement on Camilla's face. The conflict in Jen's mind became too much, and she pulled away, rushing from the bedroom and out the front door. It won't be much longer, Camilla thought as she got dressed. She got Donald up and sent him to the park to play basketball with his friends so she could clean the apartment. Jen ran down the hall to her apartment, breathing hard. What is wrong with me? Jen thought as she stormed into her apartment, closing the door and leaning against it. It took her a few minutes to calm down and catch her breath. Almost on autopilot, she took a shower and got dressed. She grabbed some cereal and lay down on the couch watching TV. In no time, she fell into a dreamless sleep.
Subscribe to our channel so that your second CH.5 doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.